This is Marc Mullinax, and welcome back to Power for the Peaceful, a podcast and class on Taoism. Today, verse 22, our fate is a wholeness that never stops.
When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. When you listen to the ground and you put your roots down, you can hear what she says if you're listening. The sweet sound of the river as she moves over the stones. The same song that the blood in your body sings as it weaves around your bones. When you're listening, are you listening?
When a cat falls out of a tree, it lets go of itself. The cat becomes completely relaxed and lands lightly on the ground. But if a cat were about to fall out of a tree and suddenly make up its mind that it didn't want to fall, it would become tense and rigid and would be just a bag of broken bones upon landing. In the same way, it is the philosophy of the Tao that we are all falling off a tree at every moment of our lives. As a matter of fact, the moment we were born, we were kicked off a precipice and we are falling, and there is nothing that can stop it. So instead of living in a state of chronic tension and clinging to all sorts of things that are actually falling with us because the whole world is impermanent, be like a cat. Alan Watts, What is Tao?
Good day, my companions along the Tao Way. Today's quote reader and a question asker is Brian Graves, Senior Lecturer in English at UNC Asheville. He has been a conversation partner of mine throughout the writing and translating process of my version of Tao Te Ching. His conversations with me accompany me to this day as I script out this podcast from week to week. Confession. Taoism is often difficult to parse. This was a hard verse for me to find a thematic through line within it. But I'm confident that just ahead you'll find something worth listening to and assuring to remember. The lesson of verse 22 is profound. If this lesson remains unattempted or misunderstood, it might mean that we skip a crucial teaching. And this is the teaching. The partial in us participates in wholeness. Even when we feel divided, we remain whole because unity, or Tao, never stops. Because here's what's at stake. There's a place in the soul that neither time, nor space, nor any of the 10,000 things can damage. Cashed out, it means this. Your identity, like mine, is not equivalent to your biography. You are not the sum total of the worst thing you've done or the worst day of your life. In this place where you have never been wounded, there is a stillness, a sureness, a wholeness, a seamless within you, which we all live out of in confidence and tranquility. And this is who you really are. Let's go to this week's reading of verse 22. Emptying brings completion. The humbled have a foretaste of completion. The twisted alone will understand the straight. Only the exhausted will find renewal. When you have little, you will gain much. Have too much, and lose your way. Therefore the sage clings only to the one, even as he models it for every one. Not focused on self, all know him. Not focused on being right, all see him as a model. Not needing to show off, his success is ensured. Not a glory seeker, his glory lasts and lasts. Not a disputer, the sage has cultivated no one under heaven to dispute against him. Ancient wisdom held that those who surrender are thereby made whole and endure. Is this just empty talk? No, wholeness belongs to these. In the first few lines of this verse 22, we see some weaker or lesser, even more partial ideas, such as the humbled, the twisted, the exhausted, and the little, attributes that some spiritualities poo-poo as evidence of spiritual weakness or lack. The Tao teaching here is so different. Whatever partial, weaker, or exhausted aspects in life one feels, these are our entry points, our passports to wholeness and unity. No division in Tao, no dividing of Tao. Even if one does feel guilty and feeling incomplete, see it rather as a movement towards our fate to be whole. We are like a plant bending towards the sun, and we gravitate, therefore, to what we are. What are we? Complete, whole, perfected in Tao. Even if we're twisted, straightness is there, and even if exhausted, renewal can overtake us. And even if one has little, one still has much. Our experience of Tao is never compromised. The person who models this wholeness, no matter what, is a force of nature. Christianity and Judaism are religions that start with an oops, which results in exile from a garden. Not so in Taoism. No matter our station, species, or status, we are always a heartbeats distant from Tao. There's nothing we can do or feel to separate us from Tao. Even if we feel less than whole on some days, and who doesn't, we cannot by feeling or even acting cause a separation from Tao. Now, there is no salvation, to use a Christian word, in Taoism, no punctiliar point in time before which we are not in Tao, and then after that point in time we are with Tao. Nope. Life in Tao is many lifetimes of choosing to learn and then practicing this learning of how one is already perfected, already completed, or to use that Christian word again, already saved, as in born saved. Even if we don't feel this wholeness and completeness, we can still practice Tao's unity. Such practice teaches us to trust Tao all about us moment by moment. Now, we all pick up bad habits along the way. We, like anyone, might forget who we are. We get out of round, out of balance. We substitute something lesser for something greater, or go for the artificial before aiming for the real. But the good news of Taoism is that we are born completed, whole, balanced, and without any deficits in our unity. When we forget, which we inevitably do, by our remembrance of Tao, we get back into the alignment and rhythm for which we are born. This alignment pre-exists our lives. So Taoism is our fate. Practicing or aligning with Tao is our nature. Already completed, straight, renewed, we practice what we already are, to become stronger, more adept, more flexible, and more trusting in our completeness. One more time, and this is important, we practice to strengthen what we already are. Now, if all this sounds wonderful, it's not magic. Tao is not some charm or magic trick. Tao does not magically protect or supernaturally ensures one against undesirable states. Rather, Tao prepares us for their inevitability. Death, disease, and accidents happen. Addictions happen. They happen to everyone, regardless of age, spiritual condition, or life circumstance. These are real. If one lives as if these undesirable states won't happen to you, or that one is insured from misfortune by a good heart, clean living, or a belief in God, then, brothers and sisters, we then practice another kind of life, an unreal one. Actual life happens, the tragic, the depressive, the unforeseen downturns and dissolutions, these cannot be sidestepped, nor can they be magically disappeared. Taoism says, bring it all on. Whatever your mental, spiritual, or physical capacity or condition is, nothing prevents one from living in the here and the now with Tao. Perhaps our feelings of disunion or smallness are our actual tickets to Tao's unity. Life is going to happen. This verse teaches, if you don't want to be broken, practice bending. The flexible don't get hurt. Being crooked and twisted are good ways and good preludes to becoming straight. Emptiness precedes getting filled, not vice versa. Renew yourself by becoming used and reused and used up. And the less one desires, the richer one becomes. Jesus said it almost the same. The one who loses their life ends up saving it. Verse 36, to look ahead, teaches the same thing as this, but with different words. Let's listen.
Tao Te Ching, verse 36. First things first. To expand, first shrink. To strengthen, know weakness. To promote, understand rejection. To be endowed, know deprivation. Subtle enlightenment is this: the pliable outlasts the inflexible, and the gentle and soft last, while the strong and the hard fade.
So Tao does not ban one's feeling or knowing limitations or being twisted or having little or being exhausted. It allows these, like a wise parent or teacher allows for their charges to make mistakes, to get things wrong, and even get hurt, so that they learn for themselves that their lives are a lifelong construction process. Knowing as soon as possible in life that there's nothing in us that prevents Tao's working fully with us. This is liberating. No one should grow up feeling their faith needs them to feel incomplete in order to feel complete. Or you have to be sinful first in order to be perfected. Tao joins us like water, like we saw in verse 8. It surrounds our hard places, bathes, irrigates, softens, washes, and then, in Grand Canyon fashion, reworks someone or something or some situation into a work of beauty.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
So, anyone willing to be a student of Tao? If you are, know that in our verse 22, Tao Te Ching concentrates one of its wildly counterintuitive and countercultural teachings. This teaching is that there's a natural law of the Tao in all things, an energy that, when followed, enables personal and community balance. This enabling is also an ennobling. The same flow in the universe is the flow within our bodies. When we recognize Tao and align ourselves with the flow of the energy of the universe, we work within its seesaw-like balance of natural rhythms, natural tempos, and natural responses. Silence follows speech, just as sleep follows wakefulness, and night follows day, sun follows storm, or yin follows yang. Remember that Tao is not an either-or dualistic spirituality, but a radical assertion that all is one. We don't get all hung up on the storm or the sun, or the yin or the yang. Both come together to complete and to renew. This is Tao's good work that we may, from the get-go, cooperate with, no matter how disabled, divided, depressed, or death-like we may feel at any given moment. So I use a phrase I haven't used much. trust Tao. As we live daily, monthly, and yearly with Tao, through maturing self-reflection and harmonious interaction with others, we learn not just to recognize, but to anticipate the ups, downs, twists, and currents of existence, and move along with them as effortlessly as water flowing, without upset or resistance. Result? The humbled retain a foretaste of completion. The warped or twisted will understand the straight better than anyone else. The exhausted find their renewal, and those who may feel little or small have much to gain. These are trust builders, and they just constitute an average, normal day with Tao.
When you're listening, are you listening? When you're listening, are you listening?
So what do we do with ego? Our feelings of being less than or ununited. These are symptoms of maintaining a separated self. Personal experience has shown me over the years that the more honest one can become, the less one is bothered with self. The practices of radical honesty send this constructed self into retirement. And there comes this sweet moment when the artificial self realizes it has nothing more it can do to or with you. Perhaps one day, as one practices Tao's liberating practices of darkness, stillness, silence, and non-doing, poof, the ego will be gone. But until that day, in this or another lifetime, I can learn from listening to my life, assessing its illusory ups and deceiving downs with ever more rigorous remembrances and applications of Tao. This is how one learns to trust Tao.
This laboring of ours with all that remains undone, as if still bound to it, is like the lumbering gait of the swan. And then our dying, releasing ourselves from the very ground on which we stood, is like the way he hesitantly lowers himself into the water. It gently receives him and, gladly yielding, flows back beneath him, as wave follows wave, while he, now wholly serene and sure, with regal composure, allows himself to glide. Rainer Maria Rilke, The Swan.
There is a place in us that is not injured, harmed, or subject to whimsical changes. There is a stillness, a sureness, a wholeness, a seamlessness in you, which we live out in confidence and in tranquility, because this is who you really are. I'm reminded of the song called The Question by the Moody Blues. Its lyrics contain this great reminder to us. And when you stop and think about it, you won't believe it's true, that all the love you've been given has all been meant for you. Homework. Consider your weak places, vulnerabilities, whatever. Write about them, journal them, and then dare yourself to consider Tao's unity already within you, despite what you've written down. And now let's go to Brian's question.
So, Mark, what are the implications of the Tao Te Ching, or of Taoism more generally, for the interwoven arts of teaching and learning? I'm curious in particular about the implications for grading, but underneath my concerns with grading is a more fundamental question that intersects with something you said in a previous episode about getting to the root of intrinsic motivations for learning, or really for doing anything. So maybe the underlying question is simply this. What does the Tao Te Ching suggest about how teachers and students can support one another in getting past the desire or the need for grades and instead tap into our intrinsic motivations to learn, to be curious, or to understand the worlds of which we are a part?
Brian, thank you so much for this awesome question. You and I are both professors. We've done grading. It's crazy sometimes, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. How do you give one letter grade after 15 or 16 weeks with a student and said, this is what you're worth?
Mm-hmm.
It is messed up.
Right. Well, and especially in a writing class where I'm teaching, where the students are creating all kinds of different things, and there's going to be one grade that somehow captures everything that they've done.
Yeah. Well, this verse 22 speaks really a lot about you don't have to be perfect or a master at something to also be completed by Tao. And so what if we regarded our students as already being completed by Tao? They have latent energies, skills that they are still discovering, and our job is to be kind of midwives or to provide an ecosystem within the classroom whereby they're entitled to bring their weather into it, their ideas, and say, this is part of the ecosystem. It is just as necessary as anyone else. So when young people who have not been colonized by ideologies out there that preach their imperfections and deficiencies, that they should somehow be prudent and sensible and major only in this or that.
Yeah.
Maybe these people are more capable of achieving greater things, unhampered as they are by societal customs and rules and habits. And this is a key point for us educators. Do we consider our students already complete, maybe lacking in experience? Mm-hmm. Or are they in dire need of being fixed or filled up in a banking model of education by Professor you and me?
Yeah.
Do we assume our students are capable of greatness or not? So the educational and the parental and the human nature implications here matter a great deal.
Yeah.
So what do you think?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense to me. I think where often some of the students I see who struggle the most are the ones who come in having mastered the sort of the AP exam or the class that does rely on a traditional grading system, and they have figured out how to do that. Yeah. But then it's like the image of the glass that's full and you can't add anything else to it. Yeah. They perceive themselves or believe themselves to have figured it all out, but then you throw something more challenging at them and they can't figure it out. They don't know what to do. And so to me the challenge seems to be how to help them let go of some of that, so that they can be more open to perceiving their own wholeness, as you say, or that to me is the biggest struggle in my classes. Is the students who come in who are quote unquote good students sometimes struggle the most.
Yeah, and I got these very rigid students, extremely capable, very smart, all A's, high GPAs, and yet they're in the class to continue their record of getting all A's. Right. Or on the other end of that same spectrum, they're in the class just to get a check mark towards graduation. Yeah. And both kinds of students, can I confess now, burn me up.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what if we can create, how, Brian, do we create the set of conditions, that eco-weather system in the classroom where everybody is naturally stimulated by their own curiosity. Mm-hmm. And they're not going to be some extrinsic student, you've got to do this and this and this and this and this.
Right.
But intrinsic, they come in with this leading sense of curiosity, this wonder, this unwordable awe, that they can learn something brand new, and that can apply not just to their major or their gen education credit, but the entire life that they live.
No, I love that. And I think part of what has to happen for them to embrace that is, what can we do as teachers that will encourage them to trust us?
Yeah.
Because this is going to feel a little destabilizing. I'll often tell my students,
Yeah.
We're going to try to do some things that are a little different from what you may be used to, including trying to minimize the grading, and a lot of them get anxious about that.
Yeah.
But if they hang in there, they usually do come around. At least that's so far. It seems
not
like
everybody,
not everybody, and there may be some who aren't telling me what they really think, but they've got to. It's got to be a safe space for them to be willing to kind of risk some of those things.
And that safe space, Brian, transfers. You're in the classroom, it's safe for them. Mm-hmm. Then they can trust you outside the class as you walk across campus and have a conversation.
Yeah.
Or maybe they can transfer that safety to another professor that reminds them of you.
Yeah.
Or another situation.
Yeah.
And they can maybe start a kind of new practice. Curiosity,
yeah,
openness, vulnerability. But you can't grade these. You can't objectify them in some scale. You can't, you can't manage these or.
Yeah. I often find myself saying when we're having conversations on campus about assessment, right, evaluating how well our programs are doing, how well our particular instructional approaches are working, how well the students are learning things, and I often maintain that especially in a first-year writing class like I teach, there's only so much that can happen in 15 weeks. Yeah. This is not an inoculation, right? This is not like everything you need to know for the rest of your life or even for the next 4 years. There's no way. And it often seems to me that what's really important is not how they do or what they show us that they know at the end of 15 weeks, but what's happening 2 years from now with them. What's happening? What have they what have they transferred? What have they carried forward 10 years from now? And that long view to me is the more important question.
And Tao is all about the long view. We can't do it in 2 days or 2 weeks or 2 years.
Yeah.
But what we can do, I think, is create the ecosystem in a classroom where a student is willing to go just beyond their comfort zone and discover something in a brand new kind of educational, pedagogical way. And then they say, oh, I did it myself.
Yeah. That's the best. That's the best.
And then we blow on that spark.
Yeah.
If we're grading, we blow on that spark and help them say, this will accompany you not next week, not just next year, but your entire lifetime.
Yeah.
This is a practice for a lifetime.
Right. And encouraging them to not only find the spark, but to nurture it themselves. How can they learn how to do that work on their own without being dependent on the teacher to do it for them? That also feels really important in that helping them to see and tap into that ecosystem that you're talking about.
Yeah, we always talk about lifelong learners, but that entails taking charge of your own education.
Yeah.
And rather than let the professor have that charge.
Yeah.
How do we pass the baton?
Yeah.
You're in charge.
Right. And I think even first year students can handle that. It's gonna push them, but I think it's worth trying.
I think that if they're athletes, they've already done that.
Yes.
If they're musicians, they will have already done that. So you take what they have done and you match it up with what they can do. Mm-hmm.
And that's a piece of integrating then to help them to see their own ecosystem and how these other things they've learned how to do or that they care about and have found their intrinsic motivation to say, hey, you can do that over here too.
Okay.
I like that.
All right. Anything else?
That's great.
I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for being the voice on this podcast. It's been really great.
You're welcome.
All right. This podcast is an original labor of love, designed, written, and co-produced by many whose central idea is that Tao Te Ching text and Taoist practices are good news for today. Tao still speaks. Brian Gray spoke and questioned. Audrey Davis drew. Molly Hartwell sang. Fortress Press holds the copyright for any use of my Tao Te Ching translation. And without you, where would we be? Thank you for your attendance in this class on Taoism. May your days begin in peace and become wombs for radical hope.